Hi, friends, and welcome to another episode of Square of Self-Love. All right, so welcome back. I know it's been quite some time. It is me, your self-love doctor, Dr. Square, and I'm officially a physician now. I have graduated medical school and I am in residency, and I'm so excited, and I am really in my element. I feel like this has been an exhausting journey getting through medical school and completing my training, but I am so glad that it got me here. I am very much so comfortable living in DC, and just I feel like everything makes sense now. Like all the things that I had to go through, all of the exhausting times, all of the heartbreaking moments, I feel like it was all worth it, and it definitely made sense for getting me here. And so I don't know how to, empower you or encourage you to just keep going through, your current situation where you're at now, to get to the light at the end of the tunnel. But I swear, knowing what I know now, I just feel like it was all worth it. I feel like it all makes sense. All of the times where I felt like, is this for me? Is medicine, meant for me? Does medicine want me to be a part of it? Will I be a good physician? How will I get to be a good physician if I can't pass this exam? All of the doubtful moments I had, they just seem so distant, so minuscule, so minute, because I still made it. I made it to somewhere I'm very proud of. I made it into a program that I'm very excited about. And I am 3 months into residency, and I think I'm doing okay. So I say all this to say, you really never know what's on the other side of your struggle. And so just keep going. I know that's arbitrary. I know that's easy for me to say, not knowing your situation, but just keep going. Even when you don't think there's a reason to keep going, you'd be surprised. And so if I can just empower you with that little tidbit, that's what I owe you guys for, being on a healthy hiatus. But I'm just proud to be back. I'm excited for the podcast now that I am an official physician. I can say I'm a psychiatrist, and I can say that, that's something I'm working towards. And I want to give good content in kind of a therapeutic format, because I feel like if this can be your introduction to therapy, kind of give you an idea of, what that might be like for you and how you might benefit from that, then I feel like I've done something great. And yes, I would love to do that for free, because that's something that makes me feel good at the end of the day. And so that is the podcast in a nutshell. But if you don't already follow me on Instagram, follow me at square.of.self.love. And if you are listening on Apple or Spotify podcasts, please subscribe so that you know when new episodes are uploaded, as well as leave a review. Let me know how I'm doing. Feel free to DM me on Instagram if you have any questions or have a topic that you'd love me to discuss. I'm also always open to having guests. So if you'd ever like to be a guest on this show, please DM me, and we can coordinate something and work it out. So without further ado, I'm really excited about today's episode. I think it definitely speaks to just how I've been feeling after this big move. And the episode topic today is going to be choose your narrative. And so I feel like a lot of times it feels like we are navigating in a space where we kind of just feel like this was assigned to us, and we just feel obligated to keep going in that light. And so I definitely feel like there's a lot of power in choosing your narrative, choosing how people see you, and also living in your truth in a way that makes your narrative obvious without having to project it or force it onto people. I feel like a natural narrative is one people can trust. If you are, it's one thing if you aren't necessarily, got it all together. If you don't have it all figured out and you're just kind of figuring it out, that's one thing. And that's okay. That's natural. That's human. But it is another thing to not have it figured out, but then force an image that you do have it figured out. that's exhausting for you. And this is all focused on you, regardless of how people see you. This is all for you. Like, that's not sustainable. That's exhausting. You're going to burn out eventually. And then that's just, more that you have to bear, possibly feeling more embarrassed or ashamed when it's like, you do the best with what you got. And so if you can find a way to figure out what's comfortable for you, move in your narrative. Your narrative may be, I don't know what my narrative is. And that's okay. But at least you give yourself that space, that grace, which is our, I feel like I need that phrase just like on every shirt that I end up making, because we will have merch eventually, y'all. Trust me. That is the biggest thing. Oh my goodness. I am like going deep into the episode topic, and I am zooming past the way we are, our natural format. So do excuse me. We're going to start off this episode how we start every other, which is we're going to do our affirmations. And so if you are new to the podcast, the way we do affirmations is I read a phrase. I will repeat it 2 or 3 times. And we do 4 phrases, 4 affirmations. I give it, roughly like 2.5 minutes. So if this isn't your jam, once we start, I'd recommend just skipping ahead 2.5 minutes. But I read off the phrase, I repeat it several times. I give space for you to either repeat it back or for you to process it and kind of just digest it, take it in. I really want you to understand and identify with each piece of the phrase. So pull out whichever part really resonates with you. Sit with the words that you feel, really resonate with your spirit in the moment, how you're feeling. And my goal is that you can build a nice collection of affirmations that work for you. And so, when we do our affirmations, that's one thing, but then in the morning, you have a nice set of maybe 2 or 3 affirmations that you repeat to yourself, and they rotate, every month, every week, or whatever. And so for a lot of people, affirmations can just be, saying it or hear it back, whatever. But for me, affirmations has been really helpful in just changing how I feel about myself, trusting how I feel about myself, improving my, self-image, and operating within a space where I respect myself and I hold myself to the standard where I feel I belong. And so that may be like pretty vague. I don't know if that's helpful for you all, but I love affirmations. And so hopefully I can, be a healthy part of your routine as well. All right, so let's get started. I have the power to rewrite my story and embrace a new chapter. I have the power to rewrite my story and embrace a new chapter. I have the power to rewrite my story and embrace a new chapter. I define who I am, and no one else can write my narrative for me. I define who I am, and no one else can write my narrative for me. I define who I am, and no one else can write my narrative for me. I release limiting beliefs and choose to see myself through a lens of self-compassion. I release limiting beliefs and choose to see myself through a lens of self-compassion. I release limiting beliefs and choose to see myself through a lens of self-compassion. I am the author of my life and choose to create a narrative that uplifts me. I am the author of my life, and I choose to create a narrative that uplifts me. I am the author of my life, and I choose to create a narrative that uplifts me. Okie doke. So that ended up being about 3 minutes. But I love the affirmation section, and yeah, I love that part. Okay. It just really sets the tone for the episode. So as I previously mentioned, the topic of today's episode is going to be creating your narrative. And I think that can be really hard to do, in today's kind of era where we have so many influences, we have so many things kind of that seem attractive that we really want to portray. And it's so easy to create a false narrative with the use of social media, with the use of, word of mouth is always one thing, so getting people to talk about, one aspect of your life. It's very easy for people to kind of zoom in themselves on one aspect of you and really only see you in one way. And so when you choose the narrative that you live by, that doesn't necessarily impact who you are. That doesn't necessarily, impact you and your decisions and how you live your life, regardless of how people see you. That's the biggest thing there. And so the main point that we're going to start with is identifying the current narrative. And so when you think about what shaped your current narrative, past experiences, beliefs, societal expectations, personal expectations from family or loved ones, and you really understand, what shaped the narrative that you're currently living in, it's important to understand why that was so impactful for you. Before you change your narrative, it's essential to identify what story you've been telling yourself and why it's been so significant in your life. Was it because, the people you love are the ones that expect these of you? Maybe it was your parents. Maybe it was a sibling that you look up to who put these expectations on you. Maybe it was a partner that you were, really involved with, or maybe it's your current partner who wants to see you one way. And so you find yourself operating within that lens as a means to make them happy. But does it make you happy? Are you happy with how you've ended up? Are you happy with the results of this narrative? And so that's really something to think about. What influences have you been empowered by? What influences have you felt slighted by? And maybe you felt like, offended by even. And these are just kind of, I hope they're not too vague, but these are really the questions to really consider when you think about what impacts you. And that's really going to be the motivating factor for maintaining this new narrative, but it's also going to be the motivating factor for changing the narrative. And understanding what you need to keep going in your new narrative. So if you are a first-time listener, I like to do this in the format of we have a main topic, and then we also have self-reflective questions. And these questions are really just for you to kind of consider, think about. I want it to be kind of a therapeutic experience listening to this podcast. And so I want you to kind of take it as, I'm giving you something to kind of think about. Early on in the episodes, I recommended having a journal when you listen to this podcast. And so if you would like to write down the questions and kind of just write your responses, that's an option as well. There are a lot of questions because each topic usually has about 3 main points, and then each main point has 3 or so self-reflective questions. So, it can be a lot of questions, but if you have a question that really resonates with you, I recommend writing it down and kind of thinking about it throughout the week if that's something that you would benefit from. So the self-reflective questions I want you to think about when considering the current narrative you're in. What story have I been telling myself about my abilities and my worth? So really, I think about it personally for me. I was really drawn to the idea of being a doctor. I was drawn to the idea of being able to be a leader in medicine and make decisions that will significantly impact and help people. And so I had to tell myself, how does that look? How am I supposed to be behaving? But I tried to take on the narrative of my friends and my peers and kind of do what worked with them. And so by gauging my abilities based on how they performed and not getting the same outcomes as they did when I did what they did, it made me feel like I wasn't good enough. It made me question my abilities. It made me question my worth to the field of medicine. And, would I be good at this? And so when you tell yourself those negative things and you're gauging yourself based on somebody else's scale, it's kind of like, a game that you're doomed to play, because you're never going to measure up when it's not your skill in the first place. And so you really have to question, what have I been telling myself? I love the quote, and, every time I see this quote, it's said that, the author is unknown. Some people have attributed it to Einstein, but a fish will always think it's a failure if it is measuring its success based on its ability to climb a tree. And so I'm sure I butchered that quote, but that's a lot of what I was doing. I was really looking at, other people's experiences, other people's strong qualities and their good characteristics. And I was really projecting that onto myself. And one, that's not fair to me. That's unrealistic. But then also they have experiences and they have views of themselves that maybe I'm not seeing, or maybe, they aren't projecting or displaying. And so that's something to really take in mind, is that we often see the qualities that we want to improve in ourselves in others. That will shine to us, but we have no clue what they're working on. And so when it comes to just like focusing your narrative and really understanding where your narrative comes from, take in mind the people that you draw from. Take in mind the people who, you kind of see yourself reflecting. And this could be subconscious or conscious. It doesn't necessarily mean you're copying them. Maybe this is a very, someone you look up to, someone you admire. And it could be more of a compliment that you kind of reflect their behaviors. And so just think about that. And then, one thing to consider as well is, are you happy with the outcome? So our next self-reflective question is going to be, how have past experiences shaped this narrative? And so when I think about this, I definitely think about just going through undergrad, how exhausting that was, and kind of telling myself the next step is going to be better. The next step is going to be easier. But it wasn't, because I wasn't necessarily establishing skills, habits, and routines to make that next step easier. And so by me not necessarily having those core changes, the experiences kept kind of compounding. And it was just kind of like I was exhausted one phase, I would be exhausted in the next phase. And it wasn't until I took a deep dive into really understand, okay, what is going on? Why does this keep happening to me? I can say too, I feel like I have taken on a narrative of, my friends see me as really social media active. I feel like I am so exhausted with social media. It is so hard to, sculpt and craft and plan and upload. And so, but, for whatever reason, my friends always say, oh, you're really good with social media. You're really on top of it. And I appreciate that. I've always been grateful for that. But it's a really hard narrative to keep up with. And I find myself getting overwhelmed very easily if I allow myself to take on a narrative. We see social media influencers all the time. And, I feel like the more you're involved in social media, the more you see the 60K, the 80K, the, 200K, the million followers kind of influencers. And it easily can become overwhelming. It can be daunting. And so I had to give myself the space to navigate where I'm comfortable. I love social media. I feel like social media has done amazing things for, our society, and people have their own decisions on, or their own opinions on, the impact that social media has had on our society. But, me personally, I feel like it's done a lot of great things. And so knowing that and knowing my appreciation for social media, I try to give myself the space to find where I'm comfortable maneuvering in social media. If that grows my platform, okay. But I have to do something that I enjoy, regardless of, if it gets me famous on social media or whatever. And so that's something to really take in mind, is what past experiences has shaped this narrative. And, my friends kind of just saying, oh, well, you're really active on social media. It had me in a rat race. It had me kind of just trying to keep up this image of, okay, they say I'm good at social media, so then I have to be good at social media. But I was exhausted. I was tired. I felt like I was just posting to post. And really, sometimes that's the game, but I also want to make sure I'm giving my personal feelings when I do those posts. So, and then our last self-reflective question for this point is going to be, does this story serve me, or is it limiting my growth? And so kind of similar to my previous point, when I was trying to keep up the rat race of, being on social media, having a strong social media presence, it was exhausting. I felt I couldn't enjoy my posts because it was literally, what can I post? Let's just throw it up there, And then if I didn't get good, results, if I wasn't getting many likes, if I wasn't getting many shares, if I wasn't getting many comments or people engaging with my social media posts, I took that personal. I was like, man, what am I doing wrong? Why can't I seem to get it? I'd compare to other people, and it was exhausting. It wasn't fun. And so I found that if I could do something that I enjoyed and do it in a way that I can breathe, and really just give myself space to grow naturally and comfortably, then I could do that. And so that's kind of what I'm doing. And I love it. I love where I'm at with social media. I miss doing my, podcast. And so I've had significant guilt because I haven't been posting on it. I kind of just left it dormant, but I also wanted to make sure that I was working on myself and I was allowing myself to grow in a way that would be beneficial for the podcast. And so, I really had to take a step back. And in that way, trying to keep up with other people's expectations was limiting my growth because it wasn't sustainable. And you guys are going to hear me say that often. But it wasn't sustainable. It wasn't something that I could do long term. And so I had to figure out the way that I could best do that. And so here we are. All right. So this next point, or main point, is a really powerful one. And I really want you guys to feel empowered with this point, but it's going to be reclaiming control of your story. And so once you recognize your narrative, the next step is to take control of it. Okay. You have the power to redefine who you are and how you want to show up in the world. Listen to this. This is critical. As many times as you'd like. Okay. You can start over if any time you want. You can redefine yourself. You can reshape yourself, reframe yourself as many times as you want. If it is not serving you, if it is not helpful for you and where you want to be, that is okay. You take full control of that, and no one can dictate whether or not you do that. And it's hard to really say, because people often feel an obligation to kind of follow through on a personality or who they are, who they've been. It was really hard for me to kind of reclaim my narrative, I guess, for my friend group, because I felt like the narrative that had been placed on me was like, the opinionated friend, like, I've been called like the bossy girlfriend, and just kind of just like a really negative view. And I had to really think about, one, who was projecting that narrative? Who were these people? Did they have my best interests at heart? Would they applaud me if I was doing good? Because that's the thing. A lot of people will put a negative narrative on you because they don't want to see a positive narrative on you, because they don't benefit from it. However, if you are the villain in their story, then they'll benefit from it. And so you really got to think about, whose narrative am I even allowing to be placed on me? And how does that impact me? Why does that impact me, right? When I have people who I care about, or I cared about at that time, placing a negative narrative on me, it's heartbreaking. It hurts because you want these people to see the best in you the way you would see the best in them. And so when you realize that they are just unwilling to do that, you really do have to ask yourself, okay, well, what do I do with this? How do I maneuver in this space that is a losing game for me, right? They don't want to see me doing well. And these are hard questions, and these are definitely questions that I had to ask myself in 2023. But where I'm at now, I am so glad I did. I'm so glad I did. I'm so glad I reclaimed control of my narrative. I became comfortable in, being the villain in some people's stories by walking away. Because if the worst thing I can do is leave your story, then that is okay with me. But I never want to be the villain in my story. And so that was the biggest thing. I wanted to really honor how I felt about myself. I know I'm not argumentative. I know I'm not bossy. And so these are things that, felt very incongruent with who I am as a person. And I had to recognize, okay, why is it that they feel I am this way? What could I be doing? And really, it took a lot of understanding and deep diving to realize no matter what I did, it was going to be painted in a negative light. And then it became a question of, okay, does this person belong in my life? And you really have to do that. When you think about rewriting and reclaiming your story, you may have to take people out of your story in order to really walk in the narrative you want to walk in. Sometimes we have negative influences. Sometimes we have people who have negative behaviors that we take on because we love them, but not necessarily because that resonates with who we are as a person. And so you really got to think about that. Are you holding on to people in your life who don't align with your story, who don't align with the narrative that you want for your life? Then you may have to have some hard discussions, hard decisions about taking them out of your life. And I'm not saying that's going to be easy. This may be, some of the hardest questions you ask yourself, but will it benefit you in the long run? Is this something that, if you tell this person, I'm having this problem and I don't feel like we are walking in the same narrative, and I think it'd be best if we, went our separate ways. How do they receive that? Do they receive that with love? Do they recognize that you're making this decision for yourself? Do they recognize that this is a hard decision for you, just the same as it is for them to be told this? Or are they only thinking about themselves in this moment? Do they only think about how this doesn't benefit them in the moment? And so just knowing that and seeing how people respond will tell you a lot about whether or not they belong in your story. And so when you reclaim control of your story, there's a lot of power in kind of shifting all of that and really just taking over what narrative you feel you should be living in. And so I love this topic. I love this main point. This one really is a strong one for me. And so here's our self-reflective questions. How can I shift my mindset to reclaim control of my narrative? Okay. And so think about it. What are you telling yourself on a day-to-day basis? That's why these affirmations are so powerful, because they become a part of your narrative. They become a part of what you tell yourself. This is a part of your mindset shift. And when you are thinking about, okay, how do I shift my mindset? It starts with what you tell yourself. How are you talking to yourself mentally? You have to incorporate positive self-talk. You have to stop yourself from saying negative things about yourself. You have to, I have a feeling about fake it till you make it. On one hand, it's true. On the other hand, are you faking it if you believe it? And so I really say the phrase should be, believe it till you become it. And that is more powerful, because if you believe that you are on the route to becoming that, it has more weight to me, in my opinion. And if you believe it, it's not fake, right? Like, I feel like when you believe something, that's what gives it life. And so in believing you are powerful, in believing this is your career, this is the career where you belong. This is your destiny, believing that you deserve that promotion. You deserve that raise. You will, be a healthy representative for your family. You will break generational curses. These are the things that if you believe them, they will happen. And I know it sounds vague, for somebody who maybe you aren't a believer of things, but I feel like in believing that I could be a doctor, I didn't know how. Let me tell you. Okay, let's talk about it. I started my educational journey, I went to undergrad or whatever. I Googled, what do you major in to be a doctor? And I had no clue where to start. I picked biology because they said it's basically 50-50. And so, it was like maybe 40% chemistry, 40% biology, and then 10% was other. And so I picked biology because I knew chemistry would take me out and embarrass me. So all of that to say, I believed it would happen. I didn't know how it was going to happen, but I knew it would. I could even go, that has been my mindset since I was 18. Literally this past year, I believed I would match into the residency program that I belonged in, and I lived my life accordingly. I just knew. I felt it in my spirit, in every fiber of my being. I knew this was my destiny. I believed that certain people would be in my life. I believed that when I got to residency, I would have all the tools I needed, the personal backing, the support, the emotional support. I would have the friends that I needed. And I allowed all of that to happen naturally. And did I lose friends? Absolutely. Did I gain friends? Absolutely. And I'm so grateful for all of the steps that it took to getting me there. I had some very hard moments in getting there. I'd been hurt. I'd been upset. I'd been, let down. And that's not to say everything that I believed would come to fruition, but the outcome that I believed in, that's the thing. You have to believe in the outcome. And you have to believe that when you get to that outcome, all that it took to get there will be necessary. And I think that's why I'm so confident in how I even got to DC, how I even got into this program, because I feel like it was all worth it. Everything that led up to it had to happen in order for me to get here. And so, sorry, I felt that in my spirit, y'all. You have to forgive me. But when it comes to shifting your mindset and reclaiming control of your narrative, it is a matter of, you really do have to ask yourself those hard questions. This is the time to be honest with yourself. Is my current narrative benefiting me? Is it helpful to me? Am I proud of this? Do I like these outcomes, right? These are the questions I was asking myself. And honestly, a lot of the answers were no. I didn't like how I was viewed in social circles. I didn't like how it felt like I was a second priority or third priority or eighth priority to the people that I prioritize first. I didn't like feeling like I was isolated and that I couldn't be myself. I felt like I couldn't be honest with myself or about my opinion around my friends, because if I said one thing, I was just the naysayer. I was the opinionated friend, the argumentative friend. When really I just wanted to express myself. I really just wanted to engage in meaningful, deep discussion, because I enjoy that aspect of personal encounter. And so when you have people who prefer to be, more superficial or are just not comfortable with those depths, it is easy to feel like you're the problem. And so I challenge you to change the playground rather than what you do, and change your surroundings and change who you are incorporating in your day-to-day life, who you are encountering, how you're encountering these people. Really take that into consideration. And I know I'm rambling. Sorry, y'all. This is my jam. But really, that's the thing is, you really have to be intentional about that mindset shift. And yes, those are all the things. You really have to be intentional about that mindset shift. And once you are, the control literally just falls into your lap. So, okay, there's that. The next self-reflective question is, what news story do I want to tell about myself? And so I knew for me, I was very comfortable in having deep discussions, having in-depth conversations about, our decisions, our behavior, why we behave the way we do, what leads to how we behave. And that's how I knew psychiatry was for me. But then also, that's how I knew that I would be good with a podcast. I have a lot of opinions, and I'm sure you guys will realize that. But I knew that I wanted to kind of do something that allowed me to get out those opinions in a way that was fruitful and productive for other people as well. And so what story did I want to tell about myself? That I love people, that I love talking to people, that I love really diving into aspects of personal life that we may not want to talk about. People have hard experiences. And what I love about psychiatry as a field of medicine is this is the side of medicine that you can't necessarily see what's going on with that person. But it impacts everything they do. And so it impacts how they love, how they live, how they show up in the world, how they're able to interact with the world. All of that is impacted based on your mental stability and your self-view. And so I love being able to help and heal in that way. But I also love talking about it and just kind of getting into that aspect of our personal life, because everyone has an aspect of them that, maybe they're not proud of. Maybe they have a hard time showing. Maybe they have a hard time broadcasting. And so, I really wanted to show that aspect of my narrative. I wanted that to be a part of my story. But that was never going to be a part of my story if I was always surrounded by people who weren't comfortable having those conversations, who weren't comfortable diving into those aspects of their lives. You see what I mean? So it's kind of like you really do have to cultivate not only that story, but make sure the people around you are comfortable with that narrative as well. Because you'll never feel comfortable telling that story if you're constantly trying to tell it to people who don't want to listen. And so that, that's very similar to the fish kind of analogy, where it's like you feel like you have a powerful narrative to share, but these people aren't interested in that. And so it's very easy to take that on personally and take that into, maybe I don't have a good story to share. Maybe what I'm trying to share isn't valuable. And I want to discourage you from even thinking like that, because that is not the case. Your story is always powerful. Your story is always important. And I really want you to believe it. So that's our self-reflective question there. And then, what small steps can I take to begin living this new story? And so I do think, I hit on this earlier, is start with the affirmations. And you don't have to take my affirmations, make your own affirmations, but think about what small steps can you take daily. That's kind of how I think about things is, what steps can I take daily? What steps can I take weekly? What steps can I take monthly? It is so hard to be consistent. Literally, consistency is very, very hard. But if you can maintain a consistent routine, just a small tidbit of something daily, weekly, monthly, that kind of reminds you of that narrative, reminds you of your story, I would recommend writing down, how do you want people to see you? I did this. I did a note in my phone. And I did what's called a getaway house. May of 2023, I went, on a trip to middle of Missouri, and I booked a getaway house. It's like a cutesy, Instagram-y kind of like lodge or whatever. And it was super nice, but it was very much so just a way to kind of like isolate, really self-reflect, and really ask myself those hard questions. Because y'all know me. I mean, if I'm going to do some self-reflection, I might as well have a nice view. You know what I mean? So I went and I typed a note in my phone basically saying, how do people view me? Am I happy with this? Why do people view me this way? And that was the question that really had me deep diving into who's around me. You know what I mean? Like, what's the narrative that's being spun about me? And then how is that similar to how I live my life? Because one thing I am is honest about, I have to be honest with myself. I feel like, plenty of people in the world will lie to me. I might as well be honest with myself. So, there may have been times where I behaved a certain way that contributed to this narrative that I don't want, but I have. And so I had to be honest with myself. What behaviors did I have that were continuing this negative narrative? And so small steps that I took to even think about kind of shifting that was, what do I need to remove from my life? What habits do I need to let go of? And I had to be honest with myself. I'll tell you a perfect example. Cursing. I had a potty mouth. Yes, I did. I'm here to confess it. I had a potty mouth. And it was definitely it wasn't necessarily something that was like hindering me from, greatness. I knew what spaces not to curse in and, where I was comfortable and able to. But I knew that it was feeding a part of a narrative that I didn't like. It made me come off as more masculine. It made me come off as, abrasive, harsh. And so I knew that isn't what I wanted to appear as. And it seems dramatic to me. Even like hearing myself say, oh yeah, I came off masculine and harsh, but it wasn't necessarily that I was that way. But if you have somebody who encounters you maybe 30 minutes and that's all they know of you, that is how they will see you. And so I had to really be more intentional with the small encounters, the amount of encounters that people would know me in, and then how they would take that. And maybe they don't see me until maybe the next holiday season, or maybe they don't see me until, a couple months from then. And if I'm the same way in another 30-minute encounter, now I'm continuing to contribute to that negative narrative. And so really being intentional with, okay, I don't curse, or if I curse, it's minimal. And that is definitely something that I'm still working on. I think I've cut down quite a bit at cursing to the point where it feels uncomfortable for me to curse too much. Or if I am cursing a lot, I'll even say, oh my gosh, like why am I cursing so much? Jesus. But so that's definitely something that I've had to take on and kind of shift. And I'm very proud of that shift alone. I feel like it's definitely helped me. I can't specify how I feel like it's helped me, but I feel like it's just made my social encounters more comfortable, because I had a lot of regret after social encounters if I felt like I cursed too much. And so it's allowed me to leave social interactions where I'm not like, oh my gosh, why am I doing this? And so that's been nice. But what small steps can I take to begin living in this new story? And so that always goes with habits. I'm always gonna, encourage you all to pick up a habit, just one tiny habit, whether that be, doing an affirmation on your ride to work, listening to this podcast, or just doing one thing that contributes to that new story. Whether that be cleaning for 20 minutes, whether that's, organizing that spot in your room that, keeps looking at you and you're like, dag, I need to do that. Even if it's like when you listen to this podcast, cleaning. And that's something that's really been helpful to me. There's certain like podcasts that I like listening to, and I realize, okay, I'm sitting here listening to this podcast, I could be doing something. And so I will say, okay, I'm going to clean the kitchen while I listen to this podcast. And if I do that every night, before I go to bed, that's not only knocking out my routine of listening to my motivational podcast, but I'm also cleaning my kitchen every night. So it's kind of like, you pair habits that you can keep up with, and things like that. Okay, sorry y'all, I love rambling, but then again, I feel like you like to ramble if you're talking about something you love, and I love talking about this. Okay, so I have 2 more main points. I'm gonna try to kind of speed through this because I know I'm rambling quite a bit. So our next main point is going to be embracing flexibility in your narrative. And you guys already know what I'm going to say. You're going to give yourself grace, okay? Your narrative doesn't have to be fixed. As you grow and evolve, so can your story. Embrace the fluidity of your narrative and allow it to change as you do. And this goes back to, you can start over as many times as you want. I cannot emphasize this enough. In high school, we always had people who would be like, oh, you're fake, you're fake, you're fake. They were like fake police, right? They would always accuse, and maybe it's because, the type of friends I would have, that was just what they did. And so, ironically, these friends were also the type of people who would fall out with you one week and then be best friends with you in 2 weeks and then fall out with you again and then befriend the people who also fell out with you. So, you can hang your hat on whoever was fake then. But I found myself feeling obligated to live out one narrative because I didn't want to be fake. I didn't want them to think I was fake. But there's a difference between being disingenuous and trying to be your best self. And that sometimes changes and adapts. And so give yourself grace to do that. Perfect example. I always thought I was going to be a surgeon in medical school. And I thought that, okay, I want to be a surgeon, and not looking back, I can definitely say it was for ego. It was because it sounded nice. Everybody thought a surgeon. And being pre-med, you kind of get a little ego boost when you tell people you're pre-med. You get an ego boost when you graduate with a degree in biology. And so you kind of find yourself chasing this ego high. And so as a medical student, as a young medical student, I thought I was going to be a surgeon, thought I was going to do otolaryngology, and I loved the reaction I got. Now, most people didn't know what ENT was, but I loved the reaction it got. And it took me, pushing through school, trying to get all these research experiences, trying to get, all this background stuff, because it's really, really competitive to get into a surgical specialty. And so trying to get all these things. And I sat with a young woman. She's probably finished residency. She's an outstanding person. And I would love to have her on here, but her first name was Atifa. I don't know her last name at this point because I only knew her as a student. But really an amazing person. And so I was fortunate to have a phone call with her, and she kind of just told me, she was like, look, this is hard work. And, you have to do a lot of work to get into this field. You have to make sure that you are doing this because you love it and because you want to, and it resonates with you. She was like, don't let ego get you into a career field that you aren't happy with. And I really had to allow myself to adapt in that way. I had to be honest with myself. This even goes back to the narrative, and what narrative I was following that I didn't necessarily agree with. And this definitely goes back to kind of just questioning, what story am I going along with and why? I was going with that story because it felt good to tell people I was going to be a surgeon, to talk about this is what I want to do. And I was truly interested in the field. But once I got to third year and I was standing for hours on hours and hours, and my muscles were hurting because I'm sitting there retracting, and, I'm in surgeries helping, and I am just physically drained. I can't go to the bathroom when I want to because you got to be present. And if you're, the physician, you got to pick a good time to stop a surgery, right? You don't just take a break when you want to. It's kind of you got to set yourself up. You got to make sure, okay, this is a good point for me to pause and take a break. And so there's a lot that goes into surgery just physically that I was exhausted. And I had to question myself, you can't really be social. You're in a room with no windows all day. And, how does that align with me? I'm social. I'm a social person. I like, interacting with people. I like talking to my patients in a way that isn't, okay, how's your pain? Okay, let's look at the wound. Okay, let's make sure you don't have an infection. I want to talk about the personal aspects of people. I want to help them navigate with the world. And that just kind of naturally melted me into psychiatry. This is something that I can resonate with personally, And I had to really question, is that possible? Is that realistic? Is that a realistic goal to have a career that you feel personally connected to? And yes, I think it is. I definitely think it is. If you feel like this is your personality and this is something that goes along with your personality, yes. But giving myself the grace to adapt, giving myself the grace to be honest with myself, and kind of just be flexible with my narrative. And so when I switched to psychiatry, of course, people were like, whoa, where'd that come from? That seems random. But to me, it just seemed like the obvious answer, something that I can personally resonate with. And so, giving yourself that grace, it really will allow you to maintain and sustain the narrative, that you're choosing for yourself. So how can I give myself permission to change my story over time? And this is hard. Who around you would support you if you changed your story versus who around you would hold it against you, would judge you harshly? Oftentimes we find ourselves trying to stick to a narrative because of the people around us, right? Oh, well, you said you were doing this one day, but now you're doing this the other, now you're doing this. Yeah, you have to switch and figure out what works for you by putting yourself in those positions. Otherwise, you will never figure out what works for you, and that's okay. But give yourself that grace. Give yourself permission to change your story whenever you want. Think about it. Life is about changing. If you weren't adapting, you will be behind and it will be overwhelming. You literally, okay, I don't have children, but like you have a kid and that first year of life looks very, very, very different from the 5th year of life, looking very different as well from the 10th year of life. And so life itself is an adapting process. It's an adaptation kind of process where you have to know how to adapt. And regardless of if you're ready to adapt, it's going to be something you have to adapt to. And so to assume that you will maintain the same story throughout your life is absurd. You will have to adapt. You will have to meld. You will have different seasons in your life, and that is absolutely okay. But you have to give yourself permission to do so. Holding it over your head, holding it against yourself is only going to make that change harder when this could be better for you. So really think about that. Our last self-reflective question for this point is going to be, what new opportunities can open up when I let go of a rigid narrative? And so I love this question. What opportunities can open up if you just let yourself be? I love that. Listen to that. See, just let yourself be. Okay. Life is hard. First of all, I say this all the time, but I really mean it. Life is hard. Give yourself the space to just be. Okay. What new opportunities would open up? Because I think about it as when we think about the opportunities we know of, that is one aspect to a multidimensional, world, right? You will never know the opportunities that exist outside of the opportunities you've received. Okay. So if you are chasing one thing and one thing only, you are cutting out all of the what if. And that what if is so dense and so fruitful and so rich and so sweet. And you would be cheating yourself if you didn't open up your world to receive all of that. And that is my best thing. What opportunities lie ahead that you might not know of. And you're not going to bypass because your route is so thin, so narrow, so rigid. And you're walking this line and this line only. But all the opportunities that lie on the sides are right there, if you broaden what you're willing to accept. And so really just give yourself grace, give yourself that permission, and stop allowing other people to dictate what narrative you follow. Because truthfully, they don't have to live with the consequences of that narrative. You do. They aren't limiting themselves in the rewards that you receive. You are. And so you owe yourself that opportunity to get all the blessings, all the goodness, all the reward. And that is exactly how you're going to get it, is by allowing yourself that flexibility, that grace, and giving yourself that permission. Okay, so we are on our last main point for this episode. And I think this point ties together the episode beautifully. And that is living authentically through your narrative. Okay, and so living in alignment with your authentic self means allowing your narrative to reflect your true values, passions, and dreams rather than societal pressures or external expectations. You will drain every aspect of your energy if you are trying to live up to societal pressures, because it's a limitless pool. It's literally has no ceiling. So you would just be climbing, trying to get to this many followers, trying to get to this many followers, trying to get this many likes. And now that I love that we were able to see what the algorithm does, because it cut so many people's following, so many people's support, so many people's engagement just because of the algorithm. When you are chasing societal measures or value, it can be manipulated and shortcutted just like that, right? It can be changed just like that, because society is constantly changing, constantly adapting, constantly chasing. That's how it stimulates itself. And so if you are constantly on the rat race, you will burn out very fast. You will be exhausted. You will look up and be like, how did I even become this person? And that's happened to me. I say you, but I can say for myself, that has exactly happened, to the point where it's like, how did I end up being like this, where I feel like I can't talk to anyone? I feel like when I talk to my friends, they nod and yeah, and then they don't listen to any advice I have, or the advice that I'm giving is taken out of context, and now it's, I look like a negative Nancy or whatever the case may be. Or even in my partner, my relationships, it was like, how do I feel like I'm not getting the relationships outcomes that I'd want? And it wasn't until I was honest with myself, the ways that I was dating, the ways I was attracting, and I was willing to shift that. And then I had to begin walking in a way that I knew I deserved, in a narrative that I could be comfortable in. And the outcome was a million times better because I was in relationships that were focused on love and support and healthy relationships that were motivating and fruitful regardless of their outcome. Maybe it didn't end in marriage, but I can honestly say I was with someone who I cared about and I loved deeply. And, I think that can go for even your friendships. If you're being friends with people based on what they can do for you and what you can do for them, and it's very transactional, you're not going to get much out of those friendships. But the friendships where you can be your authentic self, you can be honest with yourself, you can kind of deep dive into who you are, but then why you are the way you are, you will be better for those things. And so being authentic through your narrative, yes, it will eliminate people in your life, but that's okay. That's what's supposed to happen, right? And so just think about that. And so our first self-reflective question is, am I living a narrative that feels authentic to who I truly am? And for me, this answer was no. I was, trying to portray one thing. I wanted people to think I was a surgeon. I wanted people to think, oh yeah, I it's funny, before COVID, it was very much so like, oh yeah, you travel so much, but it's like, are you really traveling? Or are you just like bouncing around from like state to state and kind of just like doing the things you can, but then you're living paycheck to paycheck? You know what I mean? And that was me. I was definitely like, ooh, let me make it look like I'm doing something, but I'm actually like struggling to pay for these trips. I'm getting back from these trips and I'm not even able to pay all my bills efficiently. I'm like eating eggs and ramen because I went on this trip, you know what I mean? Versus once I was able to confidently be myself, I could then say, okay, I want to go on a trip and I want to enjoy the experience I'm having on the trip. So let me save and let me be more financially conscious so that I can enjoy myself and go on trips where I can take something back from it. And when I started traveling like that, I really enjoyed my travel experience. It wasn't just, let me take pictures and party. It became, let me experience a culture. Let me learn more about this culture and take on the things that I might not get living in the States, whatever the case may be. And so really just chasing the opportunities where I can be my authentic self and freeing myself of the expectations of others. It changed my life dramatically. I cannot emphasize that enough. But then our next self-reflective question is, what parts of my story reflect external expectations rather than my true desires? And so that goes perfectly with my last point. I feel like with social media, it's very easy to look like you're doing something. It's very easy to lead on a certain narrative. And I realized I could do that, but it made my social media the same as everybody else's, if you ask me. I'm pushing a certain narrative. I want you to say, oh, look, she does this. Oh, she's so smart. Oh, she does this. Oh, she wears designer, whatever the case may be. But if I only have 2 designer bags and I'm, switching it out, or if I'm buying a bunch of stuff just to return it, just to buy it again, just to return it, if I'm going on 2 trips a year, but I'm posting literally all the year, I'm posting these 2 trips and the photos, just to make it look like, or, if I'm cramming my trip with all these places so that I could post those places at various times to make it look like I have a bunch of places. Don't nobody want to do that. I mean, maybe somebody wants to do it, but I didn't want to do it because then I'm cheating myself out of the opportunity to actually experience a culture, actually experience, what they have to offer. I'm insulting the trip itself, if you ask me, and so these are things that I really wanted to consider. When I went to Barcelona, and I had the option to travel, throughout Europe, I really wanted to be honest with myself and say, would I really be getting the best value, the best opportunity from that trip. And so I stopped trying to kind of just cash in on going to different countries and really enjoy my experience. And I loved being in Barcelona. I loved being in Portugal. I loved going to Porto and Lisbon or Lisboa. But like being able to experience those places and really go deep into what they had to offer, that's where I felt like I was richest. And you know, I didn't care how people perceive me, whether they feel like I'm, you know, a traveler, adventurer, or whatever. I didn't care. I just know I enjoy trying new things. I enjoy learning about new things, and I enjoy going to new places and giving myself that full experience. And so, I think that's something that I really want, you know, the narrative to be about. But most of the time people don't recognize that. People are really only going to recognize, as I said, the things that they want to improve or they admire within themselves. And so if this is something that people admire in me, and I'm trying to get them to see one other aspect of my life, well, you know, I can't necessarily shape that narrative out of them. But what I can do is live authentically as myself, and the people who see it, see it. And that's always nice. Okay, so our last self-reflective question, and then I promise I'll stop yapping, is how can I align my narrative with my values and passions? And so that's probably the best thing, is once you realize, okay, what matters to me? What's important to me? What am I proud of? What can I be proud of people, you know, saying about me? You know, one of the best things about kind of just reshaping my narrative too is that compliments mean so much more to me when it's something that I've been working on, you know, or it's something that I really want people to recognize within me. And it's so nice. Like it's so nice because it's gratifying in a way that you didn't necessarily know people would see this about you. You'd hope that people would see this about you. But, you know, if you are just living authentically within yourself, people will recognize that. People will compliment that. And that is just, that's so warming. And so if you just live authentically for you, if you do what you're comfortable with, and I hate when people feel like, oh, you post pictures, so, you know, you're not being yourself. And it's like, if you lead your social media in a way that you are yourself, you are doing what you want to do, that's, you know, people are seeing as much of you as you want them to see. And so a lot of people will say, well, oh, social media is so fake. But it's like, I don't know. To me, I share what I'm comfortable with. I share what I want people to see about my life. And I think I'm leading in a genuine way. You're going to see what I do, you know, and I don't want people to think I am one type of way based on the photos I post. But I share, you know, in my captions, I'm very intentional with sharing, hey, these are the things I'm working on. These are the things I'm proud of. This is what, you know, I'm doing. I try to make it a very honest and transparent experience rather than, boom, this is what I'm doing. You know, like it gives more context. So, but regardless of how people see you, how do you see you? Because at the end of the day, that's what I want you to walk with every time. How do you see you? How do you love yourself? How can you celebrate yourself? Be proud of yourself. These are the things that you really need to sit with. And this will always propel you further every time. So thank you all so much for listening to today's episode. If you don't already follow me on Instagram, follow me at @square_of_self_love. You can also check out my episodes on YouTube, Square of Self Love, as well as if you are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify Podcasts, please subscribe. Please subscribe and leave a review. Let me know how I'm doing. Give me 5 stars if you love it. And if you don't love it, don't give any stars because, you know, we don't need you messing up my percentage. But yes, indeed, please leave a review. Let me know how I'm doing. If you ever have a topic that you want me to cover, please DM me on Instagram and I'd love to do so. Or you can also offer to be a guest. Just DM me. I have a guest form that I can send you guys as well. I am still keeping up with the newsletters, and so I anticipate having a September newsletter, or maybe I'm going to plan for an October newsletter. newsletter. But I do want to keep with the newsletters. And of course, we have our multiple choice poll question for this episode, which is, which area of your life do you feel most needs a narrative rewrite? So be sure to answer the multiple choice poll. Of course, we will be having our Discord session coming up probably in October is when I'm going to revamp those, because I really just kind of want to get my flow back going, get some good episodes uploaded for the month of September. So, all right, guys. And of course, as always, don't forget to love yourselves.